you know, you can't be on the streets and having your baby, so we'll figure something out. Just come back with us. So they invited her back to their house, and they started living together. And they thought that would be temporary, but what ended up happening was they absolutely hit it off. And so this married couple ended up sort of telling her, hey, we've always wanted to have a kid, and we've never been able. So if you want to have a baby while you live here, we would really love that. And she did. So they kept living together and had her baby in that home. And they ended up saying to her, we're getting to live one of our dreams. You know, what's something you wanted to do with your life? And this woman who had been homeless, she said, I've always wanted to be a nurse because I've been really wounded, and I want to help other people heal. And so they said, you go to nursing school, we'll take care of your baby. So she did. She went to nursing school, became a nurse, and ended up, they kept living together. It's been like over 15 years. And the way that this story ended, though, was that the woman of that married couple got really sick, and she had multiple sclerosis, and she began to die. But as she died, she had a nurse that took care of her, and that nursed her even until she died, and she did die just a couple of years ago. As you look at their family, it was such a beautiful embodiment of hospitality and reconciliation and grace. And you look at them and you see something that cannot be explained in the flesh, but only in the Spirit of God. That they are literally born again and see themselves as a new kind of family. So finally, I think one of the other things that I would say, like, we've got to recapture as a Christian practice is related to reconciliation, and I think it's this idea of nonviolence rooted in the cross, in the love of Jesus. And as I look at the cross of Jesus, you see just an affront to the patterns of violence, and I love Jesus because the cross is very counterintuitive. You know, I mean, even Jesus' own disciples, right? When the soldiers come to get Jesus, Peter pulls his sword. You remember this? And he cuts off one of the guy's ears. But what's so cool is Jesus looks at him, and I think probably Jesus first said, "You need to work on your aim, Peter." But there, he immediately scolds him. And he says, you pick up the sword, we'll die by the sword. That's not what this is about, you know? And he then takes up the ear and puts it back on the guy, you know, which is pretty cool. And I just think, like, can you imagine what that guy's story was? You know, they come to dinner that night, you know, the family sitting around the table, and they're like, little KFC, I don't know, you know, but they're like and they're going, how's everybody's day? And this dude going, weird. You know, we went to arrest this dude, and one of his bros picked up and cut my ear off, and then the dude we came to arrest killed my ear. That's really weird, you know? and so, but I think that is a part of our witness, is this love even for those who hurt us. And of course, it's that which, as some of you know, has led me over to Iraq and led us to do anti-violence workshops in my neighborhood. We have kids, nearly one kid every 48 hours killing another kid in Philadelphia. So we're continuing to nurture that nonviolence, creative conflict resolution. It also causes us to challenge the patterns of violence in our world. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, I've told the kids in the ghettos that violence won't solve their problems, but they ask me, and rightly so, then why does our government use massive doses of violence to try to bring the change that it wants in the world? And Dr. King said, I knew that I could no longer speak against the violence of the ghettos without also speaking against the violence of my but that witness of us other people, the children of God, that we are to bear witness, to know what it looks like when it stares people in the face. We look at Jesus and says, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. So as I was in Iraq, I was also surprised because I kind of thought I was going there to be a Christian witness, which I was. But I encountered not just Muslim people, but a church that was incredibly alive with this same message of nonviolence and reconciliation. And one of the most powerful services we had was thousands and thousands of Christians from all over the Middle East that had gotten together in the middle of the war. And we sang Amazings in Arabic, talking about powerful, you know, and then the bishops from all denominations stood up and they read a statement to Muslim people. And it said, from the entire Christian church, all different bishops, we wrote this together. And it said, we want you to know that we love you. And we believe that you're created the same dirt, this earth that God breathed life into, that we come from the same dysfunctional family of Abraham and Sarah, and then they led us to the cross. And this cross is the centerpiece of our faith, and it teaches us to love even those who hate us. And afterwards, I was so moved, I was crying on myself, and I talked to one of the bishops. I said, Bishop, this is one of the most powerful worship experiences I ever had. And then I said something a little ignorant. I said, I had no idea there were so many Christians in Iraq. And he goes, yes, son, this is where it all started. And he said, that's the Tigris River out there, and that's the Euphrates. Have you heard of them? And he said, you didn't invent Christianity in America, you guys just domesticated it. He said, you go back and you tell the church in the U.S. that we are praying for them. We're praying for them to be the body of Christ. And I think that's what many of us are praying, isn't it? That we would indeed look at the words of Jesus today and ask ourselves, what if he really meant it? If he really meant that we are to consider the lilies and the sparrows who don't worry about tomorrow's bread, but just pray this day our daily bread, that we're not to hurt those who hurt us, but we are to love them. That those words, I think, are as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago, and the world will be as transformed today as it was then if we say we're going to bank our lives on the fact that he meant it, that he meant this gospel. Well, let me close with these words, and then we're going to talk together for a little bit. These words that I want to read to close this part are from one of the early Christian historians, or early Roman historians. He was not a Christian himself. Aristides was trying to inform the Caesar about what is this Jesus movement? Who are these followers of Christ? So this is 100 years after Jesus was here in the flesh and rose from the dead. And this is Aristides writing to the emperor. Oh, emperor, it seems to be that these Christians have found the truth, for they don't keep for their possessions. They share everything they have. They show love to those who oppress them. In fact, it has become a passion of the Christians to love their enemies and do good to those. Everyone that anything gives grudgingly is nothing. If they see someone who is homeless, they bring him to their own home. Indeed, while Christians have nothing to spare, then the whole community will fast. They will go without food for 2 or 3 days even, so that everyone can eat together. And this way Christians can supply the poor with anything they need. This, however, is the way that the Christians live. This is their rule. How beautiful. Let me pray for us. Oh God, into people who are filled with your spirit and love. That we might not conform to the patterns of this world, but that we might be creative. That we might be creative for money or idols. Pray at least would bless them. They might actually be followers of, and there's one in this room who has turned off. Because maybe even because the of us Christians, we pray that you would whisper in your grace. That we might all hear and be moved and changed by it. Forgive us for the embarrassing things that we've done in your name. We thank you that your hand does not rest on our shoulders. But we're also so grateful that you don't want to change the world. And I really want to listen to you a little bit and hear your heart. That's what we call this afterwards a Q&A, question and answer. I call it a Q&R, question response, because I don't really have answers, but I would love to hear us talk with each other a little bit. So I think they're talk, and if you need, I can come up with your microphone. Anybody? Yeah, want to start?
Okay. This morning, and I have all these plans. I'm a freshman in college, and I'm doing photography and religion, and I'm planning on studying abroad. I don't know if I want to go to Africa or India, and I tell them I'm going to see the world. There's so much I'm learning, so much I'm doing. I don't know where to begin. The university located on 23rd Street, and you probably don't know where, but guys, it's a very poor, like, I mean, there's this little beautiful university, and there's just poverty. There's people living on park benches. I don't know, I don't balance what I should even do to help these people and balance my own safety. I go on an alley, at midnight. I mean, and that's just not safe for me to try balance and safety and if I lose with these people, like, let's see.
That's a great question. I wish you were careful, realize that there's something that's a relationship that's different from what we've had. We sometimes are nervous about it. I'm also amazed at how when I started going into the city anyway. It was really fun. My first experience when I was college. I said that people hear my son and loved me. And so I left all my credit cards. And while I'm down, someone mentioned sold my credit cards. I'll never forget that because and all these people who I interested, like they've actually never taken any from me, and then the people who I knew trust, it wasn't that simple. And so I think that part of what we do is just genuine friendships with folks, and then there is something to the wisdom, I think, of Jesus sending us out here. So you're talking about how that it's good to be in pairs, and so we've always done it together in community, and obviously there's a lot of these that applies. I think some of it's safe, some of it's also you're going to encounter some things that are being really heavy. And you want to process it, we're called to one another's burden, not our own. One of my friends who's going to work on the hurt all the time. She said, Jesus didn't carry his cross on his own, trying to get help. And so we're meant to carry those things together. So I want to urge all of us, that radical discipleship, that we're called to do it in community, we're called to do it with other people. And but I also think one other thing that Jesus in the Gospels, he says, there are those things that can do damage to our body. And we should fear that can damage our souls. And I think the things that can do damage to our body, like magic nuts and this stuff on earth, but like things that can do damage to our souls from pain and stuff, and God just this as ever, because our soul's numbed, So those are the subtle demons, the shopping malls, the we don't want to go to, So, have this as we do. I used to say, that's where you can stay wise, you can stay weak, Thanks for your question. I think a couple other ideas for where to start are 23rd Street. Just to keep our eyes open for folks that are already doing this. Everywhere we go, there's great folks already doing this. So don't think you got to do anything new. One of the most redundant things going on in Philly is a recovery meeting that was started long before we were doing it. Some folks that are all recovering from drug and alcohol addiction. So we're here to learn about our own addictions and learn about vulnerability and transparency in our lives. And so when things are happening, called community others, dot something. So you can look at that at So there's this kind of stuff, rural sort of things, families that will sacrifice their washers and dryers, and a little bit of everything. So,
and you may have, so don't be offended if you start praying for the opportunity. Joey's best. That's why so often we can see it because we're not asking.
Yeah, it's a great point. Just saying, we had to see the opportunity. Another one of Jesus' lines was, God is everywhere. So we would be able to see us or anything.
Not intended. We know why Jesus died for our sin. There he was for the rest of it. What do you think?
Jesus died for us, but Jesus died to show us what happened and killed. Justice dies on us worth killing for. And so we shouldn't be scared of death, So I think that exactly what Jesus through the sake of Jesus, making justice so uncomfortable that it has to help him. And so, justice, and even the centurion, first angel was the centurion who looked at Jesus. Anyway, it was kind of king. And what have we done? It shows that any side of it. Other times.
This morning you talked a lot about your weakness, new stuff, but not just that. Is there any sort of preparation to go into before you do something, or do you just do it?
Ours are in trouble. Our faith in Jesus. And like, if feeding was illegal, we end up getting in trouble, then we trusted the Spirit with us. And somehow that happens. But anyway, I think that's really important. And we literally is that we are exposing something, because that's the case in my neighborhood. We get arrested doing what's wrong, we get arrested sometimes for doing right. And when you see us on the news, it's because we're doing something right. So let's talk about that. And I think we even have police officers that arrested us show up to court to argue that the charges should be dropped because the laws are wrong. So that's what we're going for. In a real sense of it, as Jesus said, if you're drugged before the courts and the magistrates, don't worry, I'll give you the words. And that seems to have happened sometimes. Most of the time is that we expose what's wrong by suffering and being willing to go to jail because of those unjust laws. And that's not the same maybe in Oklahoma. I think there's different places. But even when we went to Iraq the first time, it was illegal for us to travel to Iraq with medications because of the U.S. sanctions. Part of what we wanted to expose was this is absolutely senseless that we